When my son Preston stood at the altar looking dapper in a tuxedo I paid for, I made a choice to keep my mouth shut about the fact that I had legally inherited the entire $18 million Golden Horizon Ranch from my late wife. It turned out to be the single best decision of my 70 years on this earth, because exactly 1 week after the cake was cut and the champagne was popped, my daughter-in-law, Tiffany, showed up at my breakfast table, not with a thank you card, but with a notary and an eviction notice. She thought she was kicking a helpless, senile old man out of his own home to make room for her golf course investors. She had no idea she was handing a loaded gun to the only man who knew how to use it. But before I tell you how I wiped that arrogant smirk off her face and reclaimed my dignity, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps an old veteran like me share these stories. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The humiliation started the moment I stepped into the VIP tent. The wedding reception was being held right here on the ranch on the south lawn, where my wife Abigail had spent 40 years cultivating her prize-winning roses. The air smelled of expensive perfume and roast beef, a stark contrast to the smell of hay and horse feed I was used to. I was wearing my best suit. It was a charcoal grey number I had bought for Abigail's funeral 6 months ago. It was clean-pressed and respectful, but to Tiffany, my new daughter-in-law, I looked like a stain on her perfect white tablecloth. She intercepted me before I could even reach the table with my name card on it. She was beautiful in that sharp, predatory way, her white dress costing more than my first 3 pickup trucks combined. She placed a manicured hand on my chest, stopping me cold. Her smile was plastered on, but her eyes were ice. "Dad, what are you doing here?" She hissed, her voice low, so the guests nearby wouldn't hear. I looked at her confused. "I am looking for my seat, Tiffany. I am the father of the groom." She let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a bark. "Oh, honey, no. We moved your seat. Look at you. That suit is at least 20 years out of style. And quite frankly, you smell like the stables. We have executives from the Apex Golf Group sitting at the main tables. These are million-dollar investors, Bo. We can't have you sitting there looking like the hired help. It ruins the aesthetic." I felt the blood rush to my face. I didn't smell like the stables. I had scrubbed my hands raw with harsh soap for 20 minutes before putting on this suit. But I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her. "Where do you want me to sit?" I asked calmly. She pointed a long white finger toward the edge of the property near the catering trucks and the portable restrooms. "Table 42. It is back there with the gardeners and the valet staff. You will be more comfortable with your own kind. And please, Bo, try not to wander around the main dance floor during the speeches. We want the photos to look professional. My own kind." The words hung in the air between us. I looked over her shoulder and saw my son Preston laughing with a group of men in Italian suits. He saw me. He saw his wife blocking his father from entering the party, and he did what he has done his entire life. He looked away. He pretended not to see. I didn't go to table 42. I didn't go sit by the portable toilets to eat cold leftovers. Instead, I grabbed a bottle of beer from a passing waiter tray and walked away from the white tents, away from the music, and away from the people who thought I was nothing but a stain on their landscape. I walked toward the only place on this ranch where I was treated with respect, the stables. The barn door creaked open again. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was by the footsteps, hesitant, shuffling. It was Preston. "Dad," he called out, his voice echoing in the rafters. "Are you in here?" I patted Buster one last time and turned to face my son. He looked flushed, probably from the expensive champagne or perhaps from the shame, though I doubted he had enough spine to feel real shame. "I am here, son," I said. "Congratulations. It looks like quite a party." Preston didn't meet my eyes. He fiddled with his cufflinks. "Yeah, it is. Look, Dad, I am sorry about the seating arrangement. Tiffany just wanted everything to be perfect for the investors. You know how stressed she gets. I didn't say anything. I just waited. I knew he didn't come all the way out here just to apologize. Preston never apologized unless he wanted something. Anyway, he continued, clearing his throat. That is actually why I came to find you. We have a small situation with the rooms. A situation, I repeated. Yeah, see, Tiffany really wants us to spend our wedding night in the master suite. The view of the valley is best from there. And she wants to wake up to that sunrise on her first day as mistress of the ranch. It is a symbolic thing. The master suite, my room, the room I had shared with his mother for 45 years. The room where I had held Abigail's hand as she took her last breath. The room that still smelled like her lavender lotion. You want me to sleep somewhere else? I asked, my voice flat. Just for tonight, Preston said quickly. Or maybe just for the first week, just while we settle in and host these investors. We were thinking you could move your things down to the tack room here in the barn. It has that little cot in the back, right? It is heated. And since you spend all your time with the horses anyway, we thought it would be more convenient for you. He was kicking his own father out of his bed on his wedding night to put me in a storage room next to the animals. I looked at my son. I looked at the man I had taught to ride, taught to fish, taught to be a man. Somewhere along the line, I had failed. Or maybe he had just chosen to be weak. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key ring. The heavy brass key to the main house glinted in the dim light. I could have said no. I could have told him right then and there that this was my house, my land, and that he was a guest. I could have ruined his night, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to know exactly who I was dealing with. Sure, son, I said, dropping the keys into his open palm. The tack room is fine. I prefer the company of horses lately anyway. Preston closed his hand around the keys, relief washing over his face. Thanks, Dad. You are the best. Seriously, we will make it up to you. He turned and practically ran back toward the party, back to his wife and his investors. I watched him go, then I walked back to the tack room. It was a small room, 10x10, filled with saddles, bridles and the smell of oil. There was a cot in the corner with a thin mattress. I sat down on the cot. I could hear the music from the reception thumping in the distance. They were celebrating their future. They didn't realize they had just declared war on their past. I lay back on the cot, staring at the wooden ceiling beams I had installed myself. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there planning. Tiffany wanted the master suite. She wanted the view. She wanted the title of mistress of the ranch. She thought she had won. She had no idea that the war had just begun. And the old man in the barn wasn't just a gardener. He was a Marine. And Marines don't retreat. We just regroup. The sun was just starting to crest over the Bridger Mountains when I woke up. My back was stiff. That cot in the tack room was fine for a nap between shifts during sieving season, but for a 70-year-old man spending the night, it was a reminder that my bones weren't made of steel anymore. I stretched, listening to the horses shifting in their stalls, and for a split second I forgot. I forgot about the wedding. I forgot about the investors. I forgot that I had been evicted from my own bedroom. Then reality settled in like a cold stone in my gut. I wasn't just sleeping in the barn by choice. I had been put there. I splashed some cold water from the hose on my face, ran a comb through my grey hair, and walked up the gravel path to the main house, the house I had painted 3 times, the house where I had raised my son. I expected the back door to be locked, but it wasn't. I walked into the kitchen. The smell hit me first. It wasn't the rich aroma of the dark roast coffee Abigail used to brew. It was something floral and weak like tea, pretending to be coffee. Tiffany was standing by the island, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than the tractor repair I did last month. She was typing furiously on her phone. Preston was sitting at the table, hunching over a plate of scrambled eggs. "Morning," I said, my voice rasping a little. Tiffany didn't look up. She just hummed a response. Preston mumbled something into his eggs. I walked over to the coffee pot, poured a cup of the pale liquid, and turned to the table. My legs were aching, and all I wanted was to sit down in my chair. The head of the table, the heavy oak chair with the high back that Abigail had bought me for our 10th anniversary. It was my spot. It had been my spot for 30 years. I started to pull it out. Suddenly, a designer handbag slammed down onto the seat leather. "Oh, sorry, Beau," Tiffany said, her voice bright and sharp. "You can't sit there." I paused, the coffee cup hovering halfway to my mouth. "Excuse me. That is Preston's seat now," she said, finally looking up from her phone with a tight, patronizing smile. "We are restructuring the energy in the house. I read this article about corporate funnu. The head of the household needs to sit facing the east window to maximize financial prosperity. It is important for Preston's mindset now that he is managing the estate." I looked at Preston. He was staring intently at his fork, his ears turning pink. He knew better. He knew that chair wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of respect. It was where the man who paid the bills sat. I looked at the empty seat next to him, the one with the wobbly leg I had been meaning to fix. "You can sit there," Tiffany said, pointing to the wobbly chair, "or maybe at the breakfast bar. It is more casual." I slowly set my coffee down on the counter. I didn't sit. I remained standing. I wasn't going to let her see me diminished, sitting on a broken chair in my own kitchen, while she dictated the energy of the room. "So, Preston," I said, looking directly at the top of his head, "how is the mindset? Feeling prosperous?" He flinched but didn't answer. Tiffany clapped her hands together, a sound like a pistol shot in the quiet kitchen. "Okay, since we are all here, we need to have a little family meeting." Beau grabbed a stool. "This concerns you." I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms over my chest. "I am listening." Tiffany reached into a leather portfolio on the counter and pulled out a glossy brochure. She slid it across the granite island toward me. "Preston and I were talking last night." She began, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We are really worried about you, Beau. Living out here, managing a property of this size, it is too much for a man of your age. The stairs, the icy walkways in winter, the distance from the hospital. It is just a ticking time bomb." I looked at the brochure. On the cover was a photo of two silver-haired models laughing over a game of chess in a sunlit room. The title read, "Sunset Haven Senior Living Community." "We found this place," she continued, talking faster now. "It is incredible. 5-star amenities, 24-hour nursing care, heated floors. They have a bus that takes you to the mall. It is basically a resort. We think you would be much happier there, much safer." I picked up the brochure. It felt flimsy in my rough hands. I opened it. I didn't look at the pictures of the smiling models. I looked at the fine print at the bottom of the back page. I knew how to read contracts. I knew how to spot a lie. And there it was, in font so small you would need a magnifying glass to read it properly. State-subsidized facility, accepting Medicaid and Social Security assignment. I knew Sunset Haven. It wasn't a resort. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. It was the place on the edge of town where the hallways smelled of bleach and boiled cabbage, where the staff was overworked and underpaid, and where the residents sat in wheelchairs in the hallway, staring at the walls, waiting to die. It was a place for people who had no one. She wasn't offering me a luxury retirement. She was dumping me in a state-run facility so she wouldn't have to deal with me. I looked up from the paper. My hands were steady, but my blood was boiling. 5 stars, huh? I asked. "Oh, absolutely," Tiffany said, nodding enthusiastically. "Preston went to visit it yesterday, didn't you, honey?" I shifted my gaze to my son. He finally looked up, but he couldn't hold my eyes for more than a second. "Yeah," he croaked. "It seemed nice, Dad. They have a craft room." A craft room. I had built fences that held back 2 000 LB bulls. I'd repaired tractors in sub-zero blizzards, and he was selling me on a craft room. "Who is paying for this?" I asked quietly. Tiffany waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, don't worry about the finances. We handled all the paperwork. It is fully covered by your social security checks. We just need you to sign the transfer of benefits. It is a great deal, Bo. Really, you won't have to worry about a thing." So that was the play. They wanted me out of the house to make room for their investors and their parties. They wanted my social security check to pay for my own imprisonment. And they wanted the ranch. I looked around the kitchen. I saw the copper pots Abigail had collected, the little ceramic rooster on the shelf, the height chart penciled onto the doorframe of the pantry, marking Preston's growth from a toddler to a teenager. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to scrub the Carter name off this land and turn it into a playground for the Apex Golf Group. I looked at Preston one last time. I gave him a chance, a silent, desperate chance to be the man I raised, to stand up, to slam his fist on the table and say no, to say that his father wasn't going to a state home. Preston picked up his fork and stabbed a piece of sausage. He chewed slowly, his eyes fixed on his plate. That was my answer. The boy I raised was gone. Or maybe he never existed. Maybe I had just seen what I wanted to see. I folded the brochure carefully and placed it in my shirt pocket. "Okay," I said. Tiffany blinked. Her mouth fell open slightly. "Okay, just like that." "I am an old man, Tiffany," I said, forcing a weary tremor into my voice. "Maybe you are right. My knees have been bothering me, and that barn is cold. If you say this place is nice, I trust you." A smile broke across her face, wide and predatory. She looked at Preston. "See, I told you he would be reasonable." She reached into her portfolio again and pulled out a pen. "Great. We can head over there this afternoon to sign the intake forms." I raised a hand. "Not today." Her smile faltered. "Why not?" "I need a week," I said. "A week," she repeated, her eyes narrowing. "What for?" "To pack," I said. "Not my clothes, I can pack those in an hour, but Abigail's things. There are boxes in the attic, photo albums, her quilting supplies, things that matter to me. I can't just leave them. I need to sort through them. I need to say goodbye to this house properly." Tiffany sighed, tapping her fingernails on the granite countertop. She looked at the calendar on her phone. "Fine," she said, clearly annoyed. "But 1 week, Bo." "Exactly 7 days. The investors are coming back next weekend for a site survey, and we need the guest rooms clear. We can't have boxes cluttering up the hallways. 1 week is all I need. I promised." Preston finally spoke up, his voice thick with relief. "Thanks, Dad. I will help you with the boxes if you want." "No," I said sharply. "I will do it myself." I turned and walked out of the kitchen before I lost my composure. I walked back out into the morning air, my hand clutching the brochure in my pocket. 1 week. Tiffany thought she had won. She thought she had manipulated a weak-old man into signing his life away. She thought the war was over. She didn't know that 1 week was a lifetime for a man like me. 1 week was enough time to dig up the past. 1 week was enough time to prepare a counterattack. As I walked back to the barn, I pulled out my phone. It was an old flip phone, but it worked just fine. I dialed a number I hadn't called in 6 months. "Harrison," I said when the voice on the other end answered. "Don't ask me why, but I need you to freeze my personal bank accounts. Yes, all of them. And Harrison, get the paperwork ready. We are going to have a very interesting week." I climbed the narrow wooden stairs to the attic, the air growing hotter and thicker with every step. I went straight to the far corner of the room, under the eaves, where an old rug covered the floorboards. I pulled the rug back, coughing as a cloud of dust rose up there. The third board from the wall looked just like the others, but I knew the secret. I pressed down on the knot in the wood, and the board popped up just enough for me to get a grip. Beneath it, nestled in the insulation, was a grey metal lock box. It was rusted at the hinges and cold to the touch. I pulled it out and set it on top of a trunk. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from the weight of what was inside. I fished a small key from my wallet, the one I had carried every day for the last 6 months. The lock clicked open with a sharp snap that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet attic. Inside, resting on top of a stack of old savings bonds, was a thick leather binder. I put on my reading glasses, the cheap drugstore kind Tiffany always made fun of, and opened the cover. The first page bore the seal of the state of Montana and the letterhead of Sterling and Associates Attorneys at Law. The title was printed in bold black letters, The Abigail Carter Revocable Living Trust. I ran my fingers over the paper. I could almost hear Abigail's voice in the room with me. It took me back to that rainy Tuesday 6 months before she passed. We were sitting in Harrison Sterling's office. She was frail, then the cancer already eating away at her strength, but her mind was as sharp as a tack. I remember Harrison asking her, "Abigail, are you sure about this structure? It is highly unusual to bypass the direct air completely." Abigail had reached out and taken my hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were fierce. "I am sure, Harrison. I love my son. God knows I love him, but he has no spine. He has never had to work for anything, and now he has brought that woman into our lives. Tiffany sees this ranch and sees dollar signs. She doesn't see the land. She doesn't see the legacy." She looked at me, then her eyes filling with tears. "Bo is the only one who respects this earth. He is the only one who will protect it." So we signed the papers. The terms were ironclad. Upon Abigail's death, the entire estate, the house, the stables, the 500 acres of prime Montana Valley transferred directly into the trust. And there was only one trustee, me, Bo Carter. I turned the page to the section on beneficiaries. Preston's name was there, but the clause was specific. Preston Carter receives a cash stipend of $50, social dollars. He receives no real property, no decision-making power, and no rights to the land unless the trustee, that is me, deems him capable and responsible, or upon the trustee's death. I was not just a guest in my own home. I was the owner. I was the landlord. And Tiffany and Preston were trespassing on my property, sleeping in my rooms, and plotting to sell my land. A surge of righteous anger flooded through me, hot and fast. I grabbed the binder. I wanted to march downstairs right now. I wanted to slam this document onto the granite island in the kitchen. I wanted to shove it in Tiffany's face and watch her arrogance crumble. I wanted to see Preston realize that his mother had seen right through him, that she had protected her legacy from his weakness. I stood up the binder, clutched in my hand like a weapon. I was halfway to the door when a movement outside the window caught my eye. The attic window overlooked the south lawn, the pride and joy of the ranch. It was where Abigail's rose garden lay, dozens of bushes, some of them 30-year-old hybrids she had grafted herself. They were blooming now, a riot of reds and pinks against the green grass. Tiffany was walking across the lawn. She wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a man in a cheap, shiny suit. He was holding a clipboard and stepping carelessly over the flower beds. He wasn't an investor from Apex Golf. He looked like a bottom feeder, the kind of land broker who dealt in quick flips and cash deals. I moved closer to the window, staying in the shadows so they wouldn't see me. The old window pane was thin, and the summer air carried their voices up to me. So the broker asked, tapping his pen against the clipboard, "You are sure the title is clear? No liens, no other claimants?" "Clean as a whistle," Tiffany said, her voice carrying that sickly sweet tone she used when she wanted money. "My husband is the sole heir. His mother died 6 months ago, and his father, well, he is not in the picture legally. He's just a squatter. We are in the process of relocating." The broker laughed. "Relocating, I like that. All right, so if we flatten this grade here, we can fit about 200 spots." He swept his hand across the rose garden. Tiffany nodded eagerly. "Exactly. Who needs flowers when you can have parking fees, right? Bulldoze it all. The house, the barn, the garden. We want a clean slate for the clubhouse. Bulldoze it all. She wasn't just selling the land. She was erasing us. She was going to tear out Abigail's roses, the roses I had watered every morning since she died to make room for asphalt and painted lines. I looked down at the trust document in my hand. If I went down there now, if I stopped this, what would happen? They would be angry. They would fight, but they would know. And Tiffany, being the snake she was, would find another way. She would try to have me declared incompetent. She would drag this out in court for years, draining the estate with legal fees until there was nothing left but dust. No, stopping them now wasn't enough. I didn't just want to win the battle. I wanted to end the war. I watched as the broker offered Tiffany a cigarette. She took it laughing at something he said and flicked the ash onto my wife's prize-winning piece, Rose. That tiny ember falling on the delicate petals sparked something cold and hard in my chest. I stepped back from the window. I walked back to the trunk and placed the binder inside. I didn't lock it back in the floor. I tucked it under a stack of old quilts in the trunk I was ostensibly packing to take with me. Let them think they are winning. Let them think I am weak. Let them dig their holes so deep that when the dirt finally falls in, they will never be able to climb out. I needed them to commit. I needed them to put their names on a piece of paper. That was a lie. I needed Tiffany to cross the line from greedy to criminal. I closed the trunk lid. My hands were steady now. The anger hadn't gone away, but it had changed. It had turned into focus. I was sipping my morning coffee out of a chipped mug, looking out at the mist rising off the pasture when the sound of a diesel engine shattered the peace. It was only Wednesday. I had been promised a week. I had been given a man's word, or at least my son's word, that I had 7 days to say goodbye to 40 years of my life. But as I looked out the kitchen window, I saw a white box truck backing up to the porch, its reverse beeper cutting through the morning silence like a countdown. Tiffany stepped out of her SUV before the truck had even come to a full stop. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and holding a clipboard, looking like a general inspecting the front lines. She didn't knock. She just opened the back door and breezed in, bringing a gust of cold air with her. "Good morning, Beau," she chirped, not even looking at me as she motioned for the two movers to come inside. "Change of plans." The Apex investors moved their schedule up. "They are flying in tomorrow morning, so we need the house empty today." I set my mug down slowly. "We had an agreement, Tiffany. 7 days. She waved a hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "Oh, don't be dramatic. 3 days, 7 days. What is the difference, really? It is better this way. It rips the bandage off. Besides, I called Sunset Haven, and they have a bed open up in the East Wing this morning. If we don't take it now, we might lose it." She signaled to the movers. "Start with the boxes in the hallway, and be careful with the walls. We just had them touched up." I stood there watching strangers put their hands on my life. I looked for Preston. I looked for my son to come through that door and tell his wife that a deal is a deal, but the driveway was empty. He wasn't here. He was probably hiding in the office or conveniently running an errand in town. He couldn't even look me in the eye while he evicted me. I didn't fight them. I didn't scream. I simply walked to the bedroom, picked up the single suitcase I had packed with my clothes and the few toiletries I needed, and walked out to the porch. I had already secured the trust documents. I had already hidden the evidence. Let them take the rest. Let them have the furniture. It was just wood and fabric. The soul of this house was leaving with me. "You can ride with me," Tiffany said, checking things off her list. "The truck will follow us." The automatic doors slid open, and the smell hit me instantly. It was a thick, cloying mixture of industrial-strength pine cleaner, boiled vegetables, and something underneath it all that smelled like decay. It was the smell of a place where people came to wait for the end. "This is nice, isn't it?" Tiffany said, her voice tight. "Look, they have a fish tank." She walked up to the reception desk, tapping her credit card on the counter. "I'm here to drop off Mr. Carter. The paperwork should all be ready." The receptionist, a tired-looking woman with dark circles under her eyes, sighed and pulled a thick file from a stack. "Right, Carter, room 104B. It is a shared room. We need a signature here, here, and here. And we need his social security card and insurance information." Tiffany turned to me, hand out. "Give me your wallet, Bo. I will handle the admin stuff. You go sit by the fish tank." I looked at her hand. I looked at the receptionist, who looked like she hadn't slept in a week. I looked at the residents who had been discarded by their families just like me, and I realized something. If I signed those papers, if I handed over my wallet, I would never leave this place. I would become just another number in their system. I would die in room 104B, staring at a water stain on the ceiling, while Tiffany drank champagne on my porch. I reached into my pocket, but I didn't pull out my wallet. I pulled out a handkerchief and coughed into it. "I need to use the restroom," I said, my voice shaky. "The ride. My stomach isn't feeling well." Tiffany rolled her eyes. "Hurry up, Bo." Down the hall to the left. I shuffled away, leaning heavily on the wall as if I could barely walk. I went down the hall, past the nurse's station, past the weeping woman. I turned the corner toward the restrooms, but I didn't go in. As soon as I was out of Tiffany's line of sight, I straightened my back. The shuffle disappeared. I walked with the long, purposeful strides of the man I used to be. I found the side exit, the one marked for staff only. I pushed the bar and stepped out into the alley behind the building. The air smelled of dumpster trash, but to me it smelled like freedom. I didn't look back. I walked quickly around the block to the gas station on the corner. I went to the payphone. I didn't use my cell. I didn't want Tiffany tracking me. I called the only local taxi company in town. 5 minutes later, a battered yellow sedan pulled up. The driver looked at me at my suit, that was a little too big now that I'd lost weight from stress, and my single suitcase. "Where to, pal?" he asked. I didn't say the motel, not yet. "Take me to 3rd in Main," I said, "the Sterling building." 30 minutes later, I walked into the lobby of Sterling and Associates. The receptionist looked up, startled, to see a man in a dusty suit carrying a suitcase walk into her pristine office. "I am here to see Harrison," I said. "Tell him it is Bo Carter." She pressed a button, whispering into her headset. A moment later, the double oak doors swung open, and Harrison Sterling came striding out. He was a man of 60, always impeccable in his 3-piece suits, with a mind like a steel trap. He stopped when he saw me. He took in the suitcase, the dust on my shoes, the exhaustion in my eyes. He didn't ask if I had an appointment. He just waved me in. "Come on back, Bo." He closed the door to his private office and poured me a glass of water from a crystal carafe. He sat on the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. "You look like hell, Bo," he said bluntly. "Why are you wearing that old suit? And why do you have a suitcase? Did they kick you out?" I took a long drink of water. They tried Harrison. They took me to Sunset Haven. Tiffany dropped me off like a stray dog. She was tired of feeding. She is probably still in the lobby waiting for me to come out of the bathroom. Harrison's jaw tightened. Sunset Haven. That place has been cited for violations 3 times this year. It is a hole. I know I said that is why I am not there. I am here because it is time to stop playing defense. It is time to go on the offensive. Harrison smiled a slow, shark-like smile. "I have been waiting for you to say that." "What is the play?" I leaned forward. "First, I need a place to stay where they won't look for me. There is a motel on the north side, the Starlight, cash only. I will hold up there. Second, and this is the important part, Harrison, I need you to execute a full freeze on my personal bank accounts." Harrison frowned. "The trust accounts." "No," I said, "not the trust. They don't know about the trust yet. I mean my personal checking and savings. The accounts that my social security checks go into. The accounts that have an automatic transfer set up for the 15th of every month." Harrison looked confused for a second, and then realization dawned on his face. "You mean the transfer to Preston?" "Yes," I said. "See, there was a secret I had kept from Tiffany, a secret even Preston probably didn't fully appreciate. For the last 5 years, ever since Preston started trying to play big-shot businessman with Tiffany's encouragement, he had been drowning. Car payments, credit card debt, investments that went nowhere. Every month on the 15th, I transferred $2 into his account. It was money I made from selling hay, from fixing tractors from my own pension. I did it to keep him afloat. I did it because Abigail asked me to help him. I did it because I didn't want my son to feel like a failure. Tiffany didn't know. She thought Preston was paying for his lease on that fancy truck with his own genius. She thought the credit card bills were being paid by his hard work. "Cut it off," I said, my voice hard. "Cancel the transfer. Freeze the account so that not even a penny can get out." Harrison whistled low. "That is going to hurt them, Bo. They are leveraged up to their eyeballs for this wedding and the renovation. If that money stops, that is the point," I said. "I want to see how they manage when the safety net is gone. I want to see how strong their marriage is when the checks bounce. I want to see what happens when the wolf comes to the door and they realize they kicked out the only man who knew how to hold the door shut." Harrison walked around his desk and sat down at his computer. He typed a few commands. "Done," he said. "The transfer for this month was scheduled for tomorrow. It is canceled. The account is locked. By Friday morning his card is going to be declined." "Good," I said, standing up and picking up my suitcase. Harrison looked at me. "Bo, you have millions of dollars in the trust. You could buy a hotel. You don't have to stay at the Starlight." I adjusted my tie, looking at my reflection in the glass of his window. I looked old, I looked tired, but for the first time in months I looked dangerous to catch a wolf. "Harrison, you have to wear sheep's clothing." I said, "Let them think I am destitute. Let them think I am weak. Let them think I am rotting in that nursing home. When they finally realize what is happening, it will be too late." I walked out of the office. I had a motel room to rent, and I had a war to win. The Starlight Motel lived up to its name only in the sense that the roof leaked enough to let you see the stars if you were unlucky enough to get room 12. I was in room 9, which smelled of lemon floor cleaner and decades of bad decisions. It was perfect. No one from my old life, certainly not Tiffany with her $400 shoes, would ever set foot in a place like this. It was my base of operations, my bunker. I spent the first 2 days just watching from a distance, using a pair of binoculars I had bought at a pawn shop. I watched the comings and goings at the ranch. I saw the landscaping trucks arrive to tear up the flower beds. I saw the survey crews sticking their little orange flags all over the pasture. They were carving up my life into sellable parcels. But watching wasn't enough. I needed to know what they were thinking. I needed to know their timeline. And most importantly, that I needed to know how deep the rot went. On the 3rd night, the moon was hidden behind a thick bank of clouds. It was pitch black, the kind of darkness you only get out here in the valley. I moved through the shadows of the trees, keeping the barn between me and the main house. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree. Every light was on. They weren't conserving energy. They weren't worried about the electric bill. Why would they be? They thought they had just won the lottery. I crept closer, using the shrubbery for cover, until I was right under the window of the home office. This room used to be my sanctuary. It was where I paid the bills, where I read the agricultural reports, where Abigail would sit in the leather chair and read her novels while I worked. Now it was their war room. The window was cracked open a few inches to let in the cool night air. I pressed my back against the siding, careful not to crush the hydrangeas, and listened. The voices were loud, heated. "It is declined." Preston declined. "Do you hear me?" It was Tiffany. She sounded frantic, her voice pitching up into a screech that made my teeth hurt. "I don't understand," Preston stammered. His voice sounded weak, confused. "It must be a mistake. I used it yesterday for gas." "Well, it didn't work today," Tiffany yelled. "I was at the design center. I found the perfect sectional for the new living room. Italian leather, $10,000. It was a steal. And when I handed them the card, it was declined. Do you know how embarrassing that is?" The salesgirl looked at me like I was a pauper. $10,000 for a sofa. I shook my head in the dark. That was more than I spent on feed for the entire winter. "Let me check the app," Preston said. I could hear the tapping of a phone screen. "That is weird. It says account frozen. Maybe Dad forgot to make the transfer." He didn't say transfer. He said it like it was a magic spell that just happened. He still didn't get it. He still thought the money appeared out of thin air. "Forgot," Tiffany snapped. "How could he forget? It is automatic." "You said it was automatic." "It is," Preston said. "Maybe there is a bank error. Or maybe because he moved to the nursing home. The accounts are being switched over. I will call the bank in the morning." "No, you will fix this now," she hissed. "We need that credit line. The investors from Apex are coming tomorrow. We need to put down deposits for the catering, for the staging. If we look broke, they will smell blood. They will lowball us." I risked a glance over the sill. I saw them. Preston was sitting in my leather chair, looking pale and sweaty. Tiffany was pacing the room like a caged tiger, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. "This isn't just about the sofa, Preston," she said, stopping in front of him. "We need liquidity. We have bills due. The contractor for the renovation wants his retainer. The wedding planner is still owed her final balance. We will pay them when the land sells," Preston said, trying to sound confident, but failing miserably. "Once we sign with Apex, we will have millions. We can float everything until then." "And when is that going to be?" Tiffany demanded. "A month? 2 months. Closing takes time. We don't have time." She leaned over the desk, her face twisted in a way that made her look ugly despite her beauty. "You need to call Stone at Apex tonight. Call him. It is 11:00. Preston said, "I don't care what time it is. Call him. Tell him we are ready to sign the exclusivity agreement, but tell him we need a cash advance, non-refundable. Tell him we have another buyer interested, a developer from California. Make him panic." "We can't lie to them," Preston said, "if they find out." "Oh, grow a spine," Tiffany spat. "It is business. Everyone lies. Just get the money. Tell him to bring a cashier's check tomorrow, 50,000. No, make it a H100,000. Preston rubbed his face with his hands. Okay. But why do we need that much cash right now if the credit cards are just a glitch?" Tiffany let out a noise of frustration. She walked over to the window, staring out into the dark. I ducked down just in time, holding my breath. She was looking right at where I was crouching, but her eyes were focused on something far away. "Because I am not waiting around in this dusty cow town for the closing," she said softly, almost to herself. "What did you say?" Preston asked. She turned back to him. "I said I need the money for the deposit on the penthouse." Preston blinked. "The penthouse? You mean the one in Bozeman?" Tiffany laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. "Bozeman? God, you are small-minded." "No, Preston, the penthouse in Miami South Beach. I found it online last week. Ocean view, private elevator. It is perfect." Miami Preston stood up. "But we live here. The ranch. We are selling the ranch, you idiot," she snapped. "Did you think I wanted to live here with the manure and the silence? I hate this place. I have always hated this place. As soon as that check from Apex clears, I am gone." "Gone," Preston repeated like, "we are moving." She looked at him. Her expression was devoid of anything resembling love. It was pity mixed with contempt. "Sure, honey, we are moving," but the way she said it sent a chill down my spine. She wasn't planning on taking him. I could hear it in her voice. I could see it in her eyes. She needed him to sign the papers. She needed him to be the face of the sale because she thought he was the heir. But once that money was in the account, she was going to take it and run. She was going to leave him high and dry, likely with all the debt they had acred. Preston sat back down, looking dazed. "Okay, Miami, that sounds nice. Just call Stone," she ordered. "Get the cash. I need to secure that unit before someone else takes it." She walked out of the room, leaving my son's son alone in the office. He put his head in his hands. I stayed there for a long time, crouching in the dirt. I felt a profound sadness for my son. He was a fool. Yes, he was weak, but he was being played by a master. She was going to strip him clean and leave him for dead. But along with the sadness, there was a new resolve. Tiffany wasn't just greedy, she was a flight risk. She was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. She wanted $100,000 in cash tomorrow. She wanted to rush the deal. Good. I would let her rush. I would let her think she was sprinting toward the finish line in Miami. She didn't know she was sprinting off a cliff. I carefully backed away from the house. I crawled back through the wet grass, back under the fence, back to my truck. As I drove back to the Starlight, my mind was racing. I needed to talk to Harrison. We needed to be ready. If Apex was bringing a check tomorrow, that meant they were doing their due diligence now. They would be checking the title. They would be checking the deeds. And they were about to find a landmine named Bo Carter buried in the paperwork. I walked into my motel room and poured a glass of tap water. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. "You want Miami, Tiffany?" I whispered. "I'm going to send you somewhere a lot hotter than Miami. Tomorrow, the trap would snap shut, and I would be there to watch it happen." I was sitting on the edge of the lumpy mattress in room 9 of the Starlight Motel, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee that tasted like battery acid. It was barely 9:00 in the morning on Thursday. The events of the previous night were still replaying in my mind like a bad movie. The $10,000 sofa, the Miami penthouse, the plan to take the money and run. I was just about to call Harrison to tell him about the cash advance Tiffany was trying to extort from Apex when a sharp, authoritative rap echoed on the hollow wood of my door. I froze. No one knew I was here. I had paid cash. I had parked my truck around the back behind a dumpster. I got up slowly, my hand instinctively reaching for the pocket K-knife I kept clipped to my belt. I moved to the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the view, but there was no mistaking the woman standing on the welcome mat. It was Tiffany, and she wasn't alone. Standing behind her was a short, sweating man in a polyester suit that was 2 sizes too tight. He was clutching a leather briefcase to his chest like a shield. My stomach dropped. Preston. My son had told her. I had texted him the address just in case of an emergency, just in case he woke up and realized he needed his father. Instead, he had handed me over to the enemy. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. The morning light flooded into the dim room, illuminating the stained carpet and the peeling wallpaper. Tiffany stepped back, wrinkling her nose as if she had just opened a carton of spoiled milk. "My God, Bo," she said, scanning the room with a look of absolute horror. "This is where you are staying. It is disgusting. I feel like I need a tetanus shot just standing in the doorway." I didn't step back to let her in. "What do you want, Tiffany?" "How did you find me?" "Preston told me," she said, pushing past me without an invitation. The sweating man followed her, looking nervously at the bed as if he was afraid to touch anything. "Preston was worried about you. He wanted to make sure you were safe." "Safe?" She didn't care if I was safe. She cared if I was reachable. "Who is this?" I asked, gesturing to the man. Tiffany flashed a bright fake smile. "This is Mr. Miller. He is a mobile notary public. We were on our way to meet with the insurance adjusters about your long-term care plan, and we realized we missed a signature on the intake paperwork for the nursing home." She was lying. I could see the pulse jumping in her neck. She was in a rush. She needed that $100,000 from Apex today, and Stone must have asked for something. He must have asked for proof of title. Since we are already handling so much paperwork for the sale, she continued, talking fast. I figured we could just get this out of the way. It is just a standard form, Bo. It authorizes Preston to access your medical records and handle the insurance payments, so you don't have to worry about bills. She snapped her fingers at Mr. Miller. The little man fumbled with his briefcase, his hands shaking slightly, as he pulled out a single sheet of paper. He laid it on the small scratched table by the window. "Sign right here, Mr. Carter," Miller mumbled, avoiding my eyes. He pulled a gold pen from his pocket and clicked it. I walked over to the table. I moved slowly, letting my feet shuffle on the carpet. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out my reading glasses. One of the lenses was loose, and I hadn't fixed it on purpose. It added to the image. I bent over the paper. Tiffany hovered over my shoulder, smelling of expensive vanilla perfume that clashed violently with the motel's scent of mildew. I looked at the document at the top, in bold letters. It didn't say medical authorization. It didn't say power of attorney. It said quitclaim deed. I felt a cold rage spread through my chest. A quitclaim deed is a legal instrument used to transfer interest in real property. By signing this, I would be voluntarily giving up any claim I had to the Golden Horizon Ranch. I would be transferring my rights to the grantee. I looked at the grantee line. It said Preston Carter and Tiffany Carter, joint tenants with rights of survivorship. She wasn't just selling the land. She was trying to steal the title first. She must have realized that without my signature, the title search Apex was running would come up with a discrepancy. She knew I was on the deed as Abigail's husband, even if she didn't know about the trust. She thought I was just a co-owner by marriage. She needed me to sign my rights away so she could sell the land out from under me. This doesn't look like medical forms. "Tiffany," I said, my voice wavering just enough to sound confused. "It says deed." "Oh, that is just legal jargon, Bo," she said quickly, placing her hand on my shoulder and giving it a squeeze that was more of a grip. "It is a bundle. It transfers the deed of responsibility for your care to us. It puts the house in our name for insurance purposes, so that if you get sick, the state can't take the farm to pay for your bills. We are protecting the legacy. Protecting the legacy." She was planning to bulldoze the legacy and buy a condo in Miami. I looked at Miller. He was wiping sweat from his forehead with a dirty handkerchief. He knew this was fraud. He knew he was witnessing a lie. But he probably had gambling debts or a habit to feed. Tiffany knew how to find desperate people. "I don't know," I muttered, pushing the paper away slightly. "Maybe I should have Harrison look at this. He handles my papers." Tiffany's grip on my shoulder tightened painfully. "Bo, we don't have time for that. Harrison charges $500 an hour. Do you have $500? Besides, the insurance deadline is today at noon. If you don't sign this, we can't get you into Sunset Haven. You will be stuck here in this dump." She looked around the room again, her eyes landing on my open suitcase where my meager belongings were spilled out. "Do you want to die in a place like this?" "Bo," she whispered, leaning close to my ear. "Alone, forgotten. Or do you want to be taken care of?" I looked at her. I saw the desperation in her eyes. She was terrified. If I didn't sign, she couldn't get the cash advance. If she didn't get the cash, she lost the Miami penthouse. She was cornered, and cornered animals are dangerous. But so are hunters. I let out a long, defeated sigh. I am so tired, Tiffany. I know, Bo. I know. Just sign the paper and you can rest. We will take care of everything." I sat down in the rickety chair. I reached for my coffee cup with my left hand. My hand was shaking, not because I was frail, but because I was channeling every ounce of adrenaline into a performance that had to be perfect. I picked up the pen with my right hand. I hovered it over the signature line. Tiffany held her breath. Miller leaned forward. Then my left hand spasmed. The coffee cup tipped. Oops! I cried out. The brown liquid splashed across the table. It soaked into the bottom half of the document. It didn't ruin the signature line, but it saturated the notary block and the date section, blurring the ink of the printed text just enough to make it look messy, unprofessional, suspect. Oh, for God's sake, Tiffany shrieked, snatching a napkin from the dispenser and dabbing at the paper. You clumsy old fool. Look what you did. It is okay, Miller said quickly, his voice high and nervous. It is okay. The signature line is dry. It is still valid. Just sign it before it soaks through. I am sorry, I stammered, wiping my hand on my pants. I am so sorry. My nerves. Just sign it, Bo, Tiffany hissed. Now I gripped the pen. I squinted through my glasses. I looked at the name printed below the line. Bo G. Carter. My middle name is Gabriel. It was my grandfather's name. It is on my birth certificate. It is on my driver's license. And most importantly, it is on the deed to the ranch and the trust documents. Bo Gabriel Carter. I pressed the pen to the paper. The ink flowed smoothly. I wrote B, then E, then A, then U. I paused. Tiffany tapped the table impatiently. I moved the pen again, but I didn't write G. With a shaky, jagged stroke, I wrote a capital K, Bo Carter. Then I scribbled Carter in a messy scrawl that barely looked like letters. It was a subtle change, a single letter, but in the eyes of the law, Bo K. Carter was not Bo G. Carter. A quitclaim deed signed by a person who does not match the title holder is invalid. It creates a cloud on the title. It is a defective instrument. If Tiffany had been paying attention, if she hadn't been so blinded by greed and the need for speed, she would have noticed. If she had treated me with enough respect to look at what I was doing, instead of looking at her watch, she would have seen it. But she didn't. She snatched the paper away the second the pen lifted. She blew on the signature to dry the ink. Finally, she exhaled a sound of pure relief. She handed the paper to Miller, who quickly stamped his seal over the coffee stain, making it look even more illegitimate. "Thank you, Bo," she said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "That wasn't so hard, was it?" She didn't wait for an answer. She walked to the door, the notary trailing behind her like a lost puppy. "We will send the car for you tomorrow to take you to the home," she threw over her shoulder. "Pack your things and try not to make any more messes." The door slammed shut. I heard her heels clicking on the pavement outside, fast and rhythmic. She was running to her car. She was running to the bank. She was running to fax that document to Apex. I sat in the silence of the room. I looked at the coffee puddle on the table. I picked up the napkin she had discarded and slowly wiped the table clean. "You think you have the deed, Tiffany?" I whispered to the empty room. "You have a piece of paper signed by a man who doesn't exist." I pulled out my phone and dialed Harrison. "She took the bait," I said. "She has a quitclaim deed. Yes, she forced me. But Harrison, check the signature when they try to file it. Tell the clerk to look closely at the middle initial." I heard Harrison chuckle on the other end of the line. "You are a dangerous man, Bo." "Not yet," I said, walking to the window and watching Tiffany's SUV peel out of the parking lot. "But by the time the sun goes down tomorrow, I will be." Now, I had to get ready for the party. Tiffany had mentioned a barbecue for the investors. She wanted me to pack. I wasn't going to pack. I was going to crash a party, and I was going to bring a special ingredient for the barbecue. The truth. Friday morning arrived with a sky so blue it looked painted the kind of Montana summer day that used to make me thank God for being alive. But today, the clear sky just meant good visibility for the vultures. Tiffany had called me at the motel, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she used when she needed manual labor. She didn't ask how I was sleeping or if I had eaten. She just said she needed a favor, a big favor. She said the caterers had bailed on the main course, which was a lie because I saw the catering trucks parked down the road and she needed someone to man the smokers. She said, "Dad, nobody does brisket like you." Please, just this once. For Preston, it is a big day for him. She knew exactly which buttons to push. She knew I couldn't refuse a request framed as helping my son, even if my son was currently helping to dismantle my life. So I put on my work apron, the leather one stained with grease and charcoal from 1,000 family cookouts, and I drove my truck back to the ranch. When I arrived, the transformation was complete. The survey flags were gone, replaced by white ribbons and floral arrangements that cost more than my truck. A massive white tent occupied the center of the pasture, shading round tables set with crystal and china. A jazz band was setting up on a platform built directly over the spot where I used to park my tractor. Tiffany met me at the service entrance. She didn't hug me. She handed me a spatula and pointed toward the massive industrial smokers set up behind a hedge, conveniently out of sight of the main party area. "Stay back here, Bee," she instructed, adjusting her diamond earrings. "We want the guests to smell the food, not see the cook, and please try not to talk to anyone. These are serious business people. They don't need to hear your rodeo stories." I took the spatula. I didn't say a word. I just walked to the smoker, checked the temperature gauges, and started working. It was familiar work. The heat, the smoke, the rhythmic turning of the meat. It was grounding, but it was also the ultimate insult. I was the owner of this $18 million estate, and I was being hidden behind a hedge like a dirty secret cooking lunch for the people who were coming to steal it. By 1:00, the cars started arriving. Bentleys, Mercedes, a few high-end Teslas. They rolled up the gravel driveway, kicking up dust that settled on my freshly polished truck parked way back by the manure pile. Men in suits that cost $5, zone dollars, stepped out laughing and clapping each other on the back. Women in sundresses that looked simple but probably cost a mortgage payment walked through the grass in high heels, aerating the lawn with every step. I watched them through the gaps in the hedge. I saw Preston running around like a headless chicken pouring drinks, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny. He looked desperate. He looked like a man trying to convince the world he belonged at the table when he knew deep down he was just the waiter. Then I saw him, Mr. Stone, the CEO of Apex Golf Group. He arrived in a black limousine, the only one. He stepped out, a man in his 50s with a tan that came from a bottle and teeth that were too white to be real. He walked with an air of ownership, surveying the land, not with appreciation, but with calculation. He wasn't seeing the beauty of the valley. He was seeing fairways and greens. He was seeing profit margins. Tiffany latched onto his arm, immediately guiding him toward the best table, the one right in the center with the best view of the mountains. I stood by the smoker, the heat searing my face, and listened. The wind carried their voices right to me. "It is a beautiful piece of property," Stone was saying, his voice booming. "I can see the clubhouse right there on that rise. We will have to flatten that old barn, of course. It is an eyesore. And those trees along the creek, they block the view of the 9th hole. We will clear-cut those, clear-cut the trees. My grandfather had planted those cottonwoods. They were older than Stone, and his entire company combined." Tiffany laughed, a tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, absolutely, Mr. Stone. Whatever you need. We want this to be a world-class destination. The barn is falling down anyway. It is just full of junk." Junk? She meant my tools, my saddles, the history of the Carter family. I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost rivaled the fire in the pit. I gripped the handle of the spatula until my knuckles turned white. They were carving up my life like it was the brisket on the cutting board. They were erasing me while I stood 20 FT away cooking their lunch. I looked down at the meat. It was perfectly smoked tender, falling apart. It was ready, and so was I. I loaded a massive silver platter with the sliced beef. I arranged it carefully, making it look like a work of art. Then I wiped my hands on a rag, took a deep breath, and stepped out from behind the hedge. I wasn't supposed to be seen. I was supposed to be the invisible hand that fed them. But I walked straight toward the main table, my boots heavy on the grass. Tiffany saw me coming. Her eyes widened in panic. She made a subtle shooing motion with her hand, trying to wave me back without alerting Stone. I ignored her. I walked right up to the table. Stone was in the middle of a sentence about zoning permits. He stopped when he saw the shadow fall over his plate. He looked up. He saw an old man in a stained leather apron, smelling of hickory smoke and sweat. He frowned, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Dinner is served," I said, my voice rough. I set the platter down in the center of the table with a heavy thud. The silverware rattled. "Oh, wonderful," Tiffany squeaked, jumping up. "Thank you, Beau. You can go now. We will serve ourselves." She tried to herd me away, placing a hand on my elbow and pushing, but I didn't move. I planted my feet. I looked directly at Stone. He was eyeing the meat, his nose twitching at the smell. "It looks delicious," he admitted, picking up a serving fork. "It is," I said. "I cooked it low and slow. That is the secret. You can't rush quality, just like land deals." Stone paused the fork hovering over the platter. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. "Excuse me," he said. I leaned in closer, ignoring Tiffany's nails digging into my arm. I said, "You can't rush it, Mr. Stone. This beef is tough if you don't treat it right, just like the title on this land. It can be a little chewy if you don't check the ingredients." Tiffany gasped. "Beau, stop it. He's just the cook, Mr. Stone. He's senile. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Go back to the barn, Beau. Now." But Stone didn't look away. He was a businessman. He knew when someone was trying to tell him something. He dropped the fork. "What do you mean, chewy?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. I lowered my voice to a whisper. "Intimate and dangerous. I mean, you might want to have your lawyers run the name Abigail Carter one more time," I said. "Check the trust filings. Check who the actual trustee is. Because I would hate for you to choke on a bad deal." Stone went still. His tan seemed to fade a shade or two. He looked from me to Tiffany, who was now pale and trembling with rage. "Abigail Carter," he repeated slowly. "My late wife," I said, "and the only person whose signature actually matters on this dirt." Tiffany shoved me then hard enough that I stumbled back a step. "Get out of here," she hissed, her voice rising to a shriek that turned heads at the nearby tables. "You are ruining everything! Get back to the grill, you old fool! Security? Where is security?" There was no security, just Preston, who was watching from the bar with his mouth hanging open. I smiled at Tiffany. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of the wolf who just tasted blood. "I am going, Tiffany," I said, straightening my apron. "Enjoy the meat. It is the last free meal you're going to get on this ranch." I turned and walked away. I didn't run. I walked with the slow, steady gait of a man who owns the ground he is walking on. Behind me, I heard Stone's voice, sharp and demanding. "Tiffany, who is Abigail Carter? And why does the cook know more about the title than you do?" I heard Tiffany stammering, trying to spin a web of lies that was already breaking apart. I walked back behind the hedge. My heart was hammering in my chest, but my hands were steady. I took off the apron and hung it on the hook. I picked up my beer, took a long sip, and listened to the chaos unfolding on the other side of the greenery. The party was just getting started, and I had just served the main course. Doubt. Stone was on his phone now. I could hear him barking orders to his legal team. "Run it again. Yes, right now. Look for a trust. Abigail Carter. I don't care if it is Saturday. Find it." I checked my watch. It was 2:00. Harrison was standing by. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. Now all I had to do was wait for the snap. The party died down, not with a bang, but with the hiss of a deflating balloon. I watched from the rear-view mirror of my truck as Stone's limousine pulled away from the ranch long before the scheduled toast. He didn't look like a man who had just closed the deal of the century. He looked like a man who had just bitten into a rotten apple and was trying to spit it out without making a scene. I drove straight to town. the adrenaline of the confrontation slowly fading into a cold, hard resolve. I didn't go back to the motel. I went to Harrison's office. It was Saturday, but Harrison was there. He was always there when there was blood in the water. He had a bottle of single malt scotch waiting on the desk and a laptop open to the county clerk's digital portal. I sat down in the leather chair, the silence of the office, a welcome relief after the noise and the lies of the barbecue. We didn't say much at first. We just drank the scotch and watched the screen. We were fishermen watching the bobber, waiting for the yank that would tell us the hook was set. It didn't take long. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a notification from the listening device I had planted in the ranch office. The software on my phone indicated that voices were detected. I put the phone on the desk and turned up the volume so Harrison could hear. The audio was crisp. The expensive acoustics of my home office, which I had insulated myself to keep the winter wind out, now served to trap the sounds of my family's destruction. It was Tiffany, and she wasn't using her party voice. She was screaming, "I told you to check the account, Preston. Check it again. Refresh the damn page." I could hear the frantic clicking of a mouse. "It is not there, Tiff. The balance is 0. The wire transfer from Apex didn't come through. It is pending." "No, wait, it says status held." "Held? What do you mean held?" Tiffany's voice cracked. I could visualize her pacing the room, her heels digging into the hardwood floors. "It says pending compliance review." Preston read his voice, trembling. "Beneficiary verification required." I took a sip of scotch. Harrison smirked. "Compliance review. Stone's lawyers were earning their fee today." My little whisper about the tough beef had done exactly what it was supposed to do. It made Stone look twice, and in the world of high-stakes real estate, looking twice usually meant finding the cracks in the foundation. "Call them," Tiffany shrieked. "Call Stone right now." "I can't," Preston said. "It is Saturday. His office is closed. I don't care. Call his cell." "We need that money, Preston. The deposit for the Miami penthouse is due on Monday morning. If we don't wire it by 9:00 a.m., we lose the unit. We lose the deposit. We lose everything." She wasn't worried about the ranch. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about her view of the ocean. I heard the sound of a phone dialing, then the ringtone echoing in the empty room. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Preston hung up. He isn't answering. Tiffany let out a guttural scream of frustration. It was that old man, that senile, spiteful old man. I saw him talking to Stone. I saw him whispering in his ear like a witch. What did he say? What did he tell him? "He is just a cook, Tiff," Preston said, trying to soothe her but sounding terrified himself. "Stone wouldn't listen to a cook. It is probably just a banking glitch. You know how wire transfers are on weekends." "It is not a glitch," she yelled. Stone looked at me differently after lunch. He looked at me like I was trying to sell him a stolen car. "We have to fix this. We have to reassure him." How Preston asked. "We need to send him the supplementary documents, the affidavit of ownership, the one that proves the title is clean and that your father has absolutely no claim. But Dad signed the quit claim." Preston said we sent that over. "Yes, but Miller said the signature was messy. The coffee stain. Maybe legal didn't like it. Maybe they think it is ambiguous. We need to send a clean copy, a perfect copy." I leaned forward in my chair. Harrison stopped swirling his glass. This was it. This was the moment of choice. "We can't get Dad to sign another one. Preston said he is gone. He's probably halfway to the nursing home by now or wandering around town. And even if we find him, he was acting weird today. He might refuse." "We don't need him to sign it," Tiffany said. Her voice dropped. It became low-cold and dangerous. "We just need his signature." There was a silence on the recording, a heavy, pregnant silence where morality goes to die. "Tiff, what are you saying?" Preston asked. "I am saying I have his signature on the old insurance papers from last year. I have a scanner. I have Photoshop. And I have a very expensive printer." "No," Preston whispered. "Tiff, that is forgery. That is illegal." "You know what else is illegal, Preston?" she snapped. Being broke, being humiliated, losing our future because your father decided to play games on the one day that mattered. Do you want to be poor Preston? Do you want to stay in this dusty valley for the rest of your life, cleaning up after horses? Or do you want Miami? Do you want the life I promised you? I looked at Harrison. He was already typing on his laptop, opening a new file. I waited for my son to say no. I waited for him to say that he wouldn't commit a felony. I waited for him to be the man I tried to raise. Do it, Preston said. Just make sure it looks real. The recording went quiet as they started to work. I turned off the speaker. I felt a deep, aching hollow in my chest. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was the finality of a door closing. My son hadn't just abandoned me. He had become an accomplice to a crime against me. Harrison looked up from his screen. He didn't offer sympathy. He offered facts. That is conspiracy, Bo. And the moment she hits send on that email to Apex, it becomes wire fraud. It becomes mail fraud if she overnights the hard copy. And since the value of the property is $18 million, we are talking about a federal offense with mandatory prison time. I nodded slowly. She is desperate, Harrison. She thinks she is fixing a clerical error. She doesn't know she's digging her own grave. Harrison tapped a key. I am monitoring the Apex legal portal. Stone's lawyers use a shared server for due diligence documents. If she uploads it there. We waited. The minutes ticked by like hours. Outside the window, the streetlights of the town flickered on. People were going out to dinner, living their normal lives. While in my office, my daughter-in-law was manufacturing a felony. There, Harrison said softly. He turned the laptop screen toward me. A new document had appeared in the file list. Title affidavit of sole ownership uploaded at 4:45 p.m. Harrison opened it. It was a masterpiece of deception. It was a legal document stating that Bo Carter had no mental capacity issues, that he had knowingly and willingly transferred all rights to the Golden Horizon Ranch to Preston Carter, and that he waived all future claims. And at the bottom, in crisp black ink, was my signature. But it wasn't the shaky, messy signature I had scrolled on the coffee-stained napkin. It was my real signature, the one from my old tax returns, the one she had lifted from the files in the Home Office. It was Bo G. Carter, perfect, precise, and completely fake. She didn't use the key, I said. No. Harrison said she used the G. She corrected your mistake, and in doing so, she proved that the document you signed yesterday was not the one she submitted today. She proved intent to deceive. Harrison picked up his phone. Who are you calling? I asked. I'm calling the legal counsel for Apex Golf Group. Harrison said, I went to law school with him. I think he needs to know that his client is about to be defrauded, and I think he needs to see the real trust documents. He looked at me. Are you ready for this, Bo? Once I make this call, there is no going back. The police will be involved. The FBI might be involved. This isn't a family dispute anymore. It is a criminal investigation. I thought about the rose garden. I thought about the way Tiffany had looked at me at the wedding like I was trash. I thought about Preston standing by while she planned to erase my existence. Make the call, I said. Harrison dialed. He put it on speaker. Hello, Harrison said. This is Harrison Sterling. I represent the trust of Abigail Carter. Yes, I believe your client, Mr. Stone, is currently in negotiations to purchase the Golden Horizon Ranch. I'm afraid I have some disturbing news regarding the validity of the seller's title, and I have reason to believe you have just received a forged instrument. I sat back in the chair and closed my eyes. I took another sip of scotch. It burned, going down cleansing and hot. The trap had snapped. The jaws were closed. Tiffany wanted a cash advance. She wanted a quick closing. She was going to get a closing. All right. But it wasn't going to be on a house in Miami. It was going to be the sound of a cell door slamming shut. Tomorrow was Sunday. They thought they had fixed the problem. They thought the money would be there Monday morning. I was going to make sure they were in the room when the check didn't arrive. I was going to make sure I looked them in the eye when their world fell apart. Let them have one more night of dreaming, I thought. Let them pack for Miami, because come Monday, the only trip they would be taking was downtown. Monday morning arrived with a grey steel sky that matched the mood in the conference room of Miller and Associates. This wasn't Harrison's office. This was the firm Tiffany had hired, a place that specialized in quick corporate transactions and didn't ask too many questions about where the money came from. I was sitting in the back of a tinted sedan across the street, watching them arrive. I saw Preston first. He looked nervous, tugging at his collar, pacing back and forth on the sidewalk before entering. He thought he was about to sign away his heritage for $10 million. He thought that was a fortune. He didn't know that $10 million was the discount price. Then Tiffany arrived. She walked like she owned the pavement. She was wearing a power suit, sharp and aggressive, holding a briefcase that contained the forged affidavit she had uploaded yesterday. She thought she was about to sign for $15 million. She had told Preston 10, planning to siphon the extra $5 million into an offshore account she had set up under her maiden name. I knew this because Robert Sanchez, my private investigator, had sent me the bank routing numbers at midnight. Finally, Mr. Stone arrived. He didn't look happy. He looked like a man who just wanted to get a messy job done so he could go back to making money legitimately. He walked in with his legal team grim-faced and efficient. I checked my watch. It was 9:55. The signing was scheduled for 10. I looked at Harrison, who was sitting next to me in the car. He nodded once. It was time. I opened the car door and stepped out. The damp wind hit my face, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the chill. I wasn't wearing my work overalls. I wasn't wearing the dusty, ill-fitting suit from the wedding. I was wearing a black, bespoke Italian suit I had bought 5 years ago for a gala Abigail and I attended in New York. It was tailored to perfection. My shoes were polished to a mirror shine. My face was clean-shaven, revealing the strong jawline that age hadn't softened. I stood tall, my shoulders squared the posture of the Marine who had led men through jungles and came back alive. We walked across the street. Behind us, trailing a few steps back, were 2 men in plain clothes with badges clipped to their belts, detectives from the Economic Crimes Unit. We entered the building and took the elevator to the 14th floor. The receptionist tried to stop us, asking if we had an appointment. Harrison simply flashed a court order, and she fell silent, reaching for her phone, but stopping when one of the detectives shook his head. We walked down the long corridor toward the main conference room. The glass walls were frosted, but I could see the blurred shapes of the people inside. I could hear Tiffany's voice loud and confident. "Just sign right there, Preston," she was saying, "and then Mr. Stone can release the funds." I didn't knock. I didn't hesitate. I reached out, grabbed the heavy metal handle, and threw the door open. The sound of the door hitting the stopper echoed like a thunderclap. Every head in the room snapped toward me. For a second there was total silence. They didn't recognize me. They saw a powerful, well-dressed man with a legal team and police support. They were trying to place the face. Then Tiffany gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Bo," she whispered. Preston dropped his pen. It rolled across the mahogany table and fell to the floor with a soft click. Tiffany recovered first. Her shock turned instantly to defensive anger. She stood up, her face flushing red. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "How did you get past security?" She looked at my suit. She looked at my shoes. She looked at the way I was standing, not hunched over, not shuffling. Confusion weared with her rage. "Dad," Preston stammered. You look different." Tiffany let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. She pointed a finger at me. "Did you come to beg for money, Bo? Is that it? You heard we were closing today and you put on a costume to come and panic. Well, it is too late. The papers are signed. Wait until I sell the land and maybe I will throw you a few thousand for a new truck. Now get out." I didn't answer her. I didn't even look at her. I fixed my eyes on Mr. Stone. He was sitting at the head of the table, his pen hovering over the checkbook. He was staring at me with a dawning realization. He remembered the cook. He remembered the warning about the tough beef. I walked into the room. I walked past Preston, who shrank back in his chair. I walked past Tiffany, who was trembling with a mixture of fury and fear. I walked straight to the head of the table opposite Stone. There was an empty chair there, reserved for the legal counsel. Tiffany hadn't bothered to hire because she thought she was smarter than everyone else. I pulled the chair out. The leather squeaked in the silence. I sat down, unbuttoning my jacket with a smooth, practiced motion. I rested my hands on the table, interlacing my fingers. "Hello, Mr. Stone," I said. My voice was calm, deep and resonant. It filled the room. Stone swallowed hard. "Mr. Carter, I presume." "The real Mr. Carter," I corrected. Tiffany slammed her hands on the table. "This is ridiculous. He is senile. He is confused. I have the affidavit right here. He signed it. He waived his rights. Call security right now." I ignored her. I kept my eyes locked on Stone. "I'm not here to beg, Mr. Stone," I said. "I'm here to discuss business. Specifically, I'm here to discuss the valuation of my property." "Your property?" Tiffany shrieked. "It is Preston's property." I turned my head slowly and looked at her. Just looked at her. The coldness in my eyes made her mouth snap shut. I turned back to Stone. 5 years ago, Mr. Stone, you sat in my living room with my late wife, Abigail. You drank her iced tea, and you offered her $18 million for the Golden Horizon Ranch. She turned you down because she loved the land. Stone nodded slowly. "I remember. She was a formidable woman. She was." I agreed. "So I am curious, Mr. Stone. Why are you sitting here today trying to buy her legacy for $15 million? $15 million? Preston blurted out. He looked at Tiffany, his eyes wide. "You told me it was $10 million. You said Stone talked us down to 10 because of the market." The room went deadly silent. The air was sucked out of the space. Tiffany went pale. She looked at Preston, then at Stone, then at me. The trap had just sprung, and she could feel the steel teeth digging in. I leaned back in the chair. "Ah," I said softly, "I see the oldest trick in the book. Tell the partner one price, sell for another, and pocket the difference. $5 million is a nice commission for a week of work. Isn't it, Tiffany?" Preston stood up. His chair fell over backward. "You lied to me," he whispered. "You told me 10 million. You showed me the emails." "Fake emails, Preston," I said, not taking my eyes off Stone. "Just like the fake affection. Just like the fake future in Miami. She wasn't taking you with her son. She was taking the $5 million and leaving you with the debt." "That is a lie," Tiffany screamed. She looked wild now, her hair coming loose from its perfect bun. "He is lying, Preston. He is just trying to ruin us. He is jealous. Mr. Stone, tell him we agreed on 15. Mr. Stone closed his checkbook. He placed his pen carefully in his pocket. "We did agree on 15, Mrs. Carterstone said coldly, "but that was under the assumption that you were the legitimate seller and that your husband was informed." He looked at me, and frankly, $18 million was a fair price 5 years ago. The market has gone up. If this land were actually for sale legally, it would be worth 20 today. 20 million, Preston breathed. I stood up. "But it is not for sale," I said. "Not for 15, not for 20, because this land does not belong to Preston, and it certainly does not belong to Tiffany." Harrison stepped forward. Then he placed a heavy briefcase on the table and opened it. He pulled out the original trust documents, the ones with the raised seal of the state. He also pulled out the forensic report on the forged affidavit Tiffany had uploaded. "This land belongs to the Abigail Carter Trust," Harrison announced, his voice projecting to the back of the room where the detectives were waiting. "And Mr. Bo Carter is the sole trustee. Preston Carter has no claim to the title. Never did." Harrison slid a document toward Stone's lawyers. "And this Harrison continued, is the forensic analysis of the signature on the title affidavit submitted yesterday. It is a forgery, a digital manipulation lifted from a 3-year-old tax return. Tiffany grabbed her briefcase. She backed away toward the door. This is a setup, she stammered. You are all crazy. I am leaving. She turned to run, but the door was blocked. The 2 detectives stepped forward, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. Tiffany Carter, one of them said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. We have a warrant for your arrest. Tiffany froze. The color drained from her face until she looked like a wax statue. Arrest, she whispered. For what? Wire fraud, bank fraud, forgery and conspiracy to commit grand larceny. The detective listed, walking toward her. And Apex Golf Group is pressing charges for attempted contract fraud. Tiffany looked at Preston. Help me, she begged. Preston, tell them we are partners. Tell them it was your idea. She was throwing him under the bus. Even at the end, she was trying to use him as a shield. Preston looked at her. He looked at the woman who had promised him the world. He looked at the wife who had tried to steal $5 million from him. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched as the detective spun her around and clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. I stood at the head of the table watching the woman who had tried to erase me, being led away in irons. She was screaming now, crying, begging Stone to intervene, begging me to have mercy. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a heavy, somber justice. I looked at Stone. I believe our business is concluded, I said. Stone stood up. He looked shaken. He nodded at me with a newfound respect. It is Mr. Carter. My apologies. I didn't know. You should have checked the ingredients, I said. Stone gathered his team and left. The room emptied out until it was just me, Harrison, and Preston. Preston was still standing by his overturned chair. He looked small. He looked like a child who had gotten lost in a department store. He looked at me. He looked at my suit. He looked at the man he had underestimated for his entire life. Dad, he whispered. I looked at him. I didn't smile. The time for coddling was over. We need to talk, Preston, I said, but not here. I picked up the trust documents. Meet me at the ranch in the barn and put on your work boots. You are going to need them. Harrison didn't just let the detectives take her away immediately. He raised a hand, signaling for a moment of pause. He wanted the devastation to be absolute. He wanted there to be no ambiguity, no room for Preston to tell himself later that this was just a misunderstanding or a heavy-handed police tactic. He wanted the truth to be displayed in high definition. Harrison walked over to the wall-mounted control panel and dimmed the lights. The hum of the projector descending from the ceiling sounded like a drone preparing for a strike. He connected his laptop, and a beam of light cut through the tension in the room, splashing a document onto the white screen at the far end of the table. It was the original Abigail Carter Revocable Living Trust. "Gentlemen," Harrison said, his voice dry and clinical, "and you, Mrs. Carter, look at the screen. This is the only document that matters regarding the title of the Golden Horizon Ranch." He scrolled down, highlighting a paragraph in yellow. "As you can see, Abigail Carter explicitly removed Preston Carter from the direct inheritance of the real property. She did this not out of malice, but out of protection. She knew that her son was susceptible to, let's call it, external influence." Harrison glanced at Tiffany, who was breathing hard, her hands cuffed behind her back, her face a mask of ruined mascara and fury. "The sole beneficiary and trustee is Mr. Bo Carter," Harrison continued. "He has full authority. Preston, you were never the owner. You never had the right to list the property, let alone sell it. Every document you signed, every representation you made to Apex Golf Group was void from the moment the ink touched the paper." Preston stared at the screen. He was squinting as if the light hurt his eyes. "Mom did that?" he whispered. "Mom cut me out. "She didn't cut you out, son," I said, my voice cutting through the dark room. "She protected the land from exactly this. She knew you wouldn't be able to say no to Tiffany." Harrison clicked a button. The image on the screen changed. It was a side-by-side comparison. On the left was the quitclaim deed I had intentionally botched at the motel, with the coffee stain and the bouquet Carter signature. On the right was the pristine affidavit of title that Tiffany had emailed to Apex yesterday. "Forensic analysis," Harrison narrated. "The signature on the right is a digital copy-paste from a tax return filed 3 years ago. The pixelation on the curvature of the B and the C is a fingerprint of forgery. You didn't even bother to smooth out the artifacting Tiffany. You were sloppy." Tiffany didn't say a word. She just glared at the screen, her jaw set tight. "But that is just the mechanics of the crime," Harrison said. "Now let's look at the motive." He clicked a media file. An audio waveform appeared on the screen. "We recovered this from a cloud server backup linked to Mrs. Carter's phone." Harrison lied smoothly. "It was actually from the bug I planted, but they didn't need to know that." He pressed play. Tiffany's voice filled the room, tiny but unmistakable. It was the conversation she had with the land broker weeks ago, the one I had overheard from the attic window, combined with a phone call she made yesterday to a private banker in the Caymans. The playback was damning. "I told Preston we are selling for 10 million Tiffany's," recorded voice said, dripping with arrogance. "Stone agreed to 15. I need you to route the $5 million difference into the Shell Corporation in Nevis. Label it as a consulting fee. Preston doesn't need to know. He wouldn't know what to do with that kind of money anyway. He is just the signature. I am the brains. Once the wire clears, book my flight to Miami." One way. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Preston turned slowly toward his wife. He looked like a man who had just been shot in the gut and was trying to comprehend the blood on his shirt. 5 million. He choked out. "You were stealing $5 million from me, from us." Tiffany sneered. "Oh, grow up, Preston. I was earning it. I did all the work. I found the buyer. I managed the renovation. I dealt with your father. What did you do? You just stood there and looked pretty. You are useless, Preston. You are a child playing dress-up in your daddy's clothes. I was securing my future because I knew you would blow the money on stupid trucks and bad investments within a year. I wasn't stealing," she spat. "I was charging a management fee for having to put up with you and your pathetic family." Preston flinched as if she had slapped him. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for some kind of anchor, some kind of denial. "Dad," he said, "I didn't know. I swear. I know you didn't know about the 5 million, Preston," I said quietly, "but there is a lot you don't know." I nodded to Harrison. He clicked the mouse one last time. A spreadsheet appeared on the screen. It was a bank ledger. It showed a list of transactions going back 5 years, monthly transfers, wire payments to car dealerships, payoffs to credit card companies, and 3 large transfers to an online sports betting site. Preston looked at the source column, Harrison said. Preston squinted. That is the business account. Tiffany's design business." "No," Harrison corrected. "Look closer. That represents the incoming funds that covered your overdrafts, that covered your lease payments on the Raptor, that paid off the $30,000 you lost betting on football in 2018. Preston looked confused, but Tiffany said her business was booming. She said she was handling the bills. "Tiffany's business has operated at a net loss for 6 years, Harrison said brutally. "She hasn't made a profit since 2014. "Then where did the money come from?" Preston asked, his voice rising in panic. "It came from your father," Harrison said. Preston froze. He looked at me. "What? Every month?" I said, leaning forward. "Every time you were short. Every time you needed a bailout. Every time you thought you were a big-shot businessman who just had a cash flow issue, I was there. I transferred the money from my cattle sales. I dipped into my pension. I sold the vintage tractor I restored. I paid your debts, Preston. Preston shook his head. "No, no," Tiffany said. "She said we were successful." "She lied to you, son," I said. "She used my money to prop up your ego so you wouldn't ask questions. And when I stopped the transfers 3 days ago, Harrison pointed to the bottom of the spreadsheet. The account flatlined. Harrison finished. Your credit cards were declined. The house of cards collapsed. That is why she was so desperate for the cash advance from Apex. She wasn't just greedy, she was broke. You are both broke. Without your father, you don't have a dime." Preston slumped into his chair. He looked small, defeated. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. He realized he wasn't a partner, he wasn't a businessman. He was a parasite who had been feeding on a host he had tried to kill. Mr. Stone cleared his throat. The sound broke the trance in the room. He stood up slowly, smoothing his jacket. He looked at the screen, then at Tiffany, then at Preston. His expression was one of absolute distaste. "I have seen enough," Stone said. His voice was cold, professional. "Apex Golf Group does not do business with forgers, embezzlers, or thieves." He turned to his legal team. "Cancel the escrow. Notify the bank that the wire instructions were fraudulent and draft a formal complaint to the State Real Estate Board regarding Mrs. Carter's license." He turned to me. He extended a hand. "Mr. Carter," he said, "I owe you an apology. I pride myself on doing due diligence. But your family, they put up a very convincing facade." I took his hand. "It is not your fault, Mr. Stone. Snakes are good at hiding in the grass." Stone nodded. "Regarding the property, as I said, I am willing to offer 20 million. It is a fair price. We can draft a new contract directly with you. No middleman, no forgery." I looked at him. I looked at the $18 million offer that had started this whole mess. I looked at Preston crying silently in his chair. I released Stone's hand. "Mr. Stone, I appreciate the offer. Truly, $20 million is a lot of money. It could buy a lot of peace," but I continued, my voice hardening. "I am not selling. Not for 20 million, not for 50. Stone raised an eyebrow. "You intend to keep it?" "It is my wife's legacy." I said she loved those roses. She loved that view. She didn't leave it to me so I could turn it into a fairway. She left it to me to protect it. I looked at Preston. "And there is too much cleaning up to do before I can think about selling. I have to get the smell of betrayal out of the curtains." Stone nodded slowly. "I understand. A man who holds on to his land is a man I can respect. Good day, Mr. Carter." He walked out, his team trailing behind him. The door clicked shut. Now it was just us, me, Harrison, the detectives, and the remnants of my family. The lead detective stepped forward, taking Tiffany by the elbow. "Miss Carter, it is time to go." Tiffany looked at me one last time. Her eyes were wild, desperate. "Bo, please," she begged. "I can explain. It was the stress. I wasn't thinking straight. Tell them to drop the charges. We are family." I looked at her and I looked at the woman who tried to put me in a state home to rot. "Family protects each other, Tiffany," I said softly. "You tried to bury me." I nodded to the detective. "Take her away!" Tiffany screamed as they dragged her out. She screamed at me. She screamed at Preston. She screamed until the elevator doors closed, cutting off her voice like a switch. The room was quiet again. Preston sat alone at the long mahogany table. He didn't look up. He was staring at his hands. The hands that had signed the papers. The hands that had failed to work. The hands that had taken my money for years without a thank you. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I walked over to him. I didn't touch him. I just stood there until he was forced to look at me. His eyes were red. His face was wet. "Dad," he whispered, "I am so sorry. I didn't know about the debts. I didn't know about the 5 million. I was trying to make you proud." I shook my head. "You weren't trying to make me proud, Preston. You were trying to impress a woman who despised you. You traded your father for a sofa. You traded your integrity for a lie." I sighed. "I am going home, Preston, to the ranch, My ranch. I turned to leave. "Dad, wait," he called out, standing up, swaying slightly. "What do I do? Where do I go?" "The house. Tiffany leased the cars. I don't have anywhere." I stopped at the door. I looked back at him. "You have a choice, son. You can chase after her. You can hire a lawyer you can't afford and try to save a marriage that was never real." Or I said, "You can find your work boots." "Work boots?" he asked, confused. "Yes," I said. "Because if you want to eat next month, if you want a roof over your head, you are going to have to earn it." "I am done paying your bills, Preston. The ATM is closed." I opened the door. "Meet me at the barn tomorrow at sunrise. Don't be late." And Preston, he looked at me, hope and fear wearing in his eyes. "Don't wear a suit. You are going to be shoveling manure. It is the only way I know to clean the soul." I walked out into the hallway, leaving my son to face the silence of the empty room and the wreckage of his life. I had the trust documents in my hand. I had my dignity back. And tomorrow, the real work would begin. Not just rebuilding the ranch, but seeing if I could rebuild the man my son was supposed to be. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight is distinct. It is a cold, mechanical clicking that signals the end of freedom and the beginning of consequences. In that silent conference room, it sounded like a gavel striking a block. The lead detective, a man with tired eyes who had seen enough greed to last a lifetime, didn't handle Tiffany with the reverence she was used to. He spun her around efficiently, pulling her wrists together behind her back. She gasped as the cold metal bit into her skin, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "You have the right to remain silent." The detective recited his voice. Bored and rhythmic, Tiffany didn't remain silent. She exploded. The shock wore off, replaced by the raw, ugly panic of a trapped animal. She twisted in the detective's grip, her perfectly styled hair falling across her face in chaotic strands. She looked at the Apex legal team, who were packing their briefcases with clinical detachment. "Tell them to stop!" she screamed at Mr. Stones, retreating back. "It was a misunderstanding. I was just trying to expedite the process. I have the money. I can pay back the deposit." Mr. Stone paused at the door. He didn't turn around. He just adjusted his cuff and walked out. The Apex lawyers followed him, leaving a vacuum of silence that Tiffany filled with her hysteria. She realized then that there was no negotiation. There was no deal to be made. The check wasn't coming. The Miami penthouse wasn't happening. The only real estate in her future was an 8x10 cell. She turned her venom on the only target left. She looked at Preston. My son was standing by the window, his face the color of old ash. He looked like he had been hollowed out from the inside. He was staring at his wife, but I don't think he was seeing the woman he married. He was seeing a stranger. "Do something, you coward!" Tiffany shrieked, her voice cracking. "Do not just stand there. Tell them you authorized it. Tell them you told me to sign it." Preston blinked slow and heavy. "I didn't," he whispered. "I told you not to. I told you it was illegal." Tiffany's face twisted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. The mask she had worn for 3 years, the mask of the loving, supportive wife, disintegrated completely. "You pathetic little man," she spat. "You are worthless. Do you hear me? Worthless? I did everything for you. I dressed you. I told you what to say. I built you up because you were nothing but a hollow shell in a cheap suit. I should have left you years ago. I should have taken the money and run the first chance I got." Preston flinched with every word, as if he were being physically struck. He took a half-step back, his hands trembling at his sides. "You said you loved me." He choked out, his voice barely audible. "Love you." Tiffany laughed, and it was a sound that made the hair on my arms stand up. It was sharp and jagged like broken glass. "I loved the potential, Preston. I loved the ranch. I loved the idea of $18 million. But you are just baggage. You are a man-child who needs his daddy to pay his credit card bills. You couldn't even sell your own inheritance, right? You let an old man outsmart you. She lunged toward him, but the detective held her back firmly. I hope you rot in that barn, she screamed, spittle flying from her lips. I hope you starve. You are nothing without me, nothing. The detective gave a sharp tug on her arm. That is enough, Mrs. Carter. Let's go. They began to drag her toward the door. She fought them, her heels skidding on the polished floor. She looked at me then. For a second, just a second, the hate vanished, replaced by a terrifying clarity. She looked at me, not as a father-in-law, but as the executioner. You did this, she hissed at me. You ruined my life. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. She had ruined her own life the moment she decided my existence was an inconvenience. I watched them haul her out into the hallway. Her screams echoed off the walls, drawing stares from the office workers in the glass cubicles. I watched until the elevator doors slid shut, cutting off her voice with a finality that rang in my ears. Then there was silence, a heavy, suffocating silence that filled the room. Harrison closed his laptop with a soft click. He looked at me, gave a small, somber nod, and signaled for the other detective to wait outside. He knew this was a moment that needed to happen without an audience. I turned to my son. Preston had collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. He was shaking his shoulders, heaving with silent sobs. He had lost his wife. He had lost his fortune. He had lost his illusion of who he was. I walked over to the table and stood across from him. "Preston," I said. He didn't look up. He just shook his head. "She hated me, Dad. The whole time. She hated me." "She used you, son." I corrected him gently but firmly. There is a difference. Hate requires passion. Using someone just requires indifference. She saw a mark, and she took it. He looked up then. His eyes were red and swollen. "I am sorry, Dad. I am so sorry. I should have stopped her. I should have stood up for you. Should have doesn't fix fences, Preston," I said. "And it doesn't pay debts." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the checkbook Harrison had given me for the new account. The account with $50 Zone dollars in it. I looked at it for a moment. I could write him a check right now. I could give him $5,000, enough to get an apartment, enough to buy some food, enough to start over somewhere else. It would be the easy thing to do. It would be what I had always done. I put the checkbook back in my pocket. No, that was the old Beau. That was the father who crippled his son with kindness. "Preston, listen to me," I said, my voice hardening. He wiped his face with his sleeve, looking at me like a dog waiting to be kicked. "You are in a deep hole, son. Tiffany is gone, and she isn't coming back. The lawyers are going to come for everything she put in her name, which means they are coming for your lease, your furniture, and probably your clothes. You have $0 in your bank account because I stopped the transfers." Preston nodded miserably. "I know I am homeless, Dad." I looked at him. I looked at the soft hands that hadn't done a day of real work in 5 years. I looked at the expensive suit that was now wrinkled and stained with tears. "You have 2 choices," I said. He looked at me, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He thought I was going to offer him money. He thought I was going to offer him a room in the main house with his old allowance back. "Choice number 1, I said, holding up a finger. "You can follow her. You can go down to the precinct. Use your $0 to hire a public defender and stand by the woman who just called you worthless. You can try to salvage a lie." Preston shuddered. No, I can't." "Good," I said. "Choice number 2. I leaned down, placing my hands on the table, leaning into his space so he couldn't look away. "You come back to the ranch, but not as an owner, not as a partner, and not as a guest." Preston frowned, confused, then, "As what?" "As a man," I said. "You come back to the ranch and you work. I fired the landscaping crew Tiffany hired. The flower beds are a mess. The barn needs painting. The fence on the north pasture is leaning." "But, Dad," Preston stammered, I don't have any work clothes." Tiffany threw them all out. Then you work in your suit until you earn enough to buy a pair of jeans, I said ruthlessly. I straightened up. I am offering you a job, Preston. Minimum wage, room and board included. You will sleep in the tack room, the same room you put me in on your wedding night. You will eat what I cook, and you will work from sunrise to sunset. Preston stared at me. The tack room? Yes, I said. It is heated. Remember, you told me it was comfortable enough for me. It should be comfortable enough for you. I saw the struggle in his face. His pride was fighting with his desperation. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to storm out, but he had nowhere to go. And deep down, under the layers of entitlement Tiffany had plastered onto him, I saw a spark of the boy who used to follow me around the tractor. I'm giving you a chance to earn your name back. Preston, I said softly, I'm giving you a chance to learn what it feels like to build something instead of selling it. I walked to the door. I didn't look back. I am leaving now, I said. I'm going to buy a steak, a real steak, and then I'm going home. I opened the door and paused. If you are there when I get back, have a shovel in your hand. If you aren't, well, good luck in the city, son. I walked out of the conference room, nodding to Harrison. We walked to the elevator in silence. When the doors closed, Harrison looked at me. That was harsh, Bo, he said. It was necessary, I replied, watching the numbers count down. He has been asleep for a long time, Harrison. Waking up hurts. But as I walked out of the building into the cool afternoon air, I felt a lightness in my chest. I hadn't felt in years. I had my ranch. I had my dignity, and for the first time in a long time, I had a son who might just have a chance at becoming a man. I got into my truck. I didn't drive to the steakhouse immediately. I drove toward the edge of town, toward the rolling hills of the Golden Horizon. I had a fence to fix, and maybe, just maybe, a family to rebuild, but this time we were going to build it on a foundation of sweat and truth, not lies and easy money. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. It was time to go home. 6 months have passed since the day the handcuffs clicked shut in that sterile conference room. The seasons turned quickly in Montana. The lush green of summer has given way to the deep burning gold of autumn. The air is crisp, now smelling of wood smoke and turning leaves. The Golden Horizon Ranch lives up to its name this time of year, glowing under the afternoon sun, as if the land itself is on fire. I stood on the porch of the main house, watching a figure working down by the south paddock. It wasn't a hired hand. It wasn't a landscaper from the city. It was Preston. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit. He was wearing a pair of Carhartt overalls that were stained with mud and grease. His hands, once soft and manicured, were rough, calloused and wrapped in work gloves. He was digging a post hole, replacing a section of the fence that had rotted out years ago. The same fence line I used to crawl under to spy on his betrayal. I walked down to him, carrying 2 thermoses of coffee, real coffee, black and strong. He stopped digging when he heard my boots on the gravel. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his sleeve. He looked tired. He had lost weight, the soft pudge of easy living replaced by lean muscle. He looked older, too. The lines around his eyes were deeper, but the fear was gone. The desperation that used to haunt him, the constant need to impress people who didn't care about him, had vanished. "Break time," I said, handing him a thermos. "Thanks, Dad," he said, taking it. His grip was firm. We leaned against the fence, looking out over the valley. The Apex survey stakes were long gone. Pulled up and used for kindling, the rose garden was recovering the bushes pruned back and mulched for the winter. "Harrison called today," I said, taking a sip of the hot liquid. Preston tensed slightly, but he didn't look away. "What is the news?" "The trial date is set for next month," I told him. "The federal prosecutor isn't offering a plea deal. The evidence regarding the wire fraud and the forgery is too strong, and since Mr. Stone testified to the grand jury about the Apex contract, Tiffany is looking at 10 years minimum." Preston nodded slowly. He looked down at his muddy boots. Did she ask about me?" I shook my head. "No. She asked about the accounts in the Caymans. She wanted to know if we had found them all. She's still trying to negotiate with money she doesn't have. Preston let out a short, bitter laugh. Some things never change, do they? I looked at him. You signed the divorce papers. I did, he said. Harrison sent them over yesterday. It is done. I am free. He took a long drink of coffee, staring at the horizon. I am 40 years old, Dad, he said quietly. I have no house. I have no car. I have a negative credit score, and I am digging holes for $12 an hour. I looked at the straight line of the new fence posts. I looked at the barn that had been scraped and repainted. I looked at the man standing next to me. You are Deadtree Preston, I said. For the first time in your adult life, you don't owe anyone a dime. You are sleeping soundly at night, and you built that fence straight. That is not nothing. That is a foundation. He looked at me, a small, genuine smile touching his lips. It is a start. I guess it is. I agreed. I didn't tell him everything Harrison and I had discussed. I didn't tell him about the new document sitting in the safe in my office. After the dust settled, I had updated the Abigail Carter Trust. I didn't cut Preston out completely, but I didn't hand him the keys to the kingdom either. The new clause was specific. Preston would inherit the ranch, but not today, not tomorrow. The clause stipulated a 10-year probationary period. For 10 years, Preston had to work the land. He had to learn the business from the ground up, not as an owner, but as a steward. He had to prove he could keep the books in the black. He had to prove he valued the soil more than the sale price. If, and only if, he completed that decade of service with integrity, the title would transfer to him. If he failed, if he tried to sell, if he fell back into his old ways, the entire estate would be liquidated and donated to the Hector Vance Foundation for struggling seniors. It was harsh. It was strict. But it was the only way to save him. You can't give a Matt a legacy. He has to earn it. And looking at him now, seeing the pride he took in a simple fence post, I thought he just might make it. I finished my coffee. Get back to work, I said, clapping him on the shoulder. That fence isn't going to fix itself, and the herd is moving to this pasture tomorrow. Yes, sir, Preston said. He picked up the post-hole digger. He didn't complain. He just went back to work. I walked back up the hill, past the house, past the rose garden, toward the small family cemetery on the ridge. I stopped in front of a simple granite headstone. Abigail Carter, beloved wife and mother. I took off my hat and held it to my chest. The wind ruffled my grey hair. I felt a peace settle over me, a deep, abiding silence that I hadn't felt since the day she died. I stood there for a long time, watching the sun dip lower, casting long shadows across the grass. I kept the promise, Abby. I whispered to the wind, "The roses are safe, the house is safe." I looked down toward the paddock where Preston was still working a small figure against the vastness of the landscape. And the boy is going to be okay, I said. It was touch and go for a while. We almost lost him, but I think he is finding his way back. I smiled a sad, weary smile. You were right, Abigail. You were right to hide the trust. You were right to force my hand. Sometimes you have to let them fall. You have to let them hit the dirt and bleed a little, because if you keep catching them, they never learn how to stand up. I put my hat back on, adjusting the brim against the setting sun. "The ranch is safe, my love," I said, "and as long as there is breath in my body, it will stay that way." I turned and walked back down the hill toward the house. The lights were coming on in the kitchen. I had a steak to cook, and for the first time in a long time, I had a son coming home for dinner who was hungry for the food, not the money. It wasn't the ending I had expected 6 months ago. It was better. It was real. And in a world full of Tiffany's and Apex golf groups, reality is the most valuable thing a man can own. At 70, I realized that blind love can be more dangerous than neglect. For years, I thought silently paying my son's debts was helping him, but I was only robbing him of his manhood and making him easy prey for predators like Tiffany. The most valuable legacy I saved wasn't the $18 million ranch, but the lesson of self-respect and honest labor. I learned that you cannot give a man a spine. He must grow it himself. Sometimes, to save a man, you have to let him fall hard into the mud, where only sweat and truth can pull him back up. What do you think about my ultimatum for Preston? Was making him shovel manure too harsh? Or was it exactly the wake-up call he needed to finally become a man? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more gritty, real-life stories from the ranch.